Welcome to Dome Theory, the second biggest Cavaliers podcast on the internet. I talk about the Cavs all the time, Carter. He's Carter Rodriguez, Chase Down Podcast. You've seen Justin Rowan on our show a million times. Finally get Carter on here, his co-host of the official Cavaliers podcast. And I love this team. I love what they're doing. And now you put the cherry on top with a Donovan Mitchell trade. I think good things are coming to Cleveland. Carter, finally, welcome to Dome Theory.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm glad you finally wised up and got rid of Justin, who's really just been surviving off my pod coattails for years now. No, Justin's the best, and you will have to settle for me, but I'm still happy to be here and happy to talk about a pretty freaking crazy trade.
It's unbelievable what they've pulled off here. Now, we'll kind of go piece by piece on what Cleveland sent back, but to land Mitchell and to get the centerpiece, a star of the future to Cleveland, you get LeBron back in, what was it, 14-ish there, and
Yeah.
those are the two, and I guess there's Doherty way back and some other stuff that happened on those old Cavs teams, but this has to be right up there if it's not the biggest acquisition in Cavs history.
Yeah, if just by straight up trade, I mean, I think it's right up there with Kevin Love. It's right up there with trading for Brad Daugherty's draft rights, which I'm barely counting because I wasn't alive. So, or I was alive.
You didn't feel the
really.
excitement for that one.
Yeah. So of my conscious brain lifetime, I think this is arguably bigger than trading for Kevin Love, just insofar as you kind of knew you had you already had LeBron and you knew trading for Love was a legitimate leap into championship contender status, which you kind of already were there. It's such a safer trade to trade for Kevin Love after you already have signed LeBron James to come home. This is a real, it's a ballsy move. I said this a few times. I think I've said it on our own podcast that no one's blaming Kobe Altman if he has a chill summer. The team won 44 games after having an over-under of 26 and a half. Everyone's loving the vibes. Kobe gets a contract extension. JB gets a contract extension. So if there's ever a year just to kind of chill, re-sign your guys, move, see what you have, see what kind of growth you have. Yeah, this would be it. You draft a guy like Ochai Agbaji, who is a high floor, low ceiling pick. Okay, I guess they're just gonna have a chill summer. Oh, guess not. They went and picked up the best trade asset on the market. They picked up for at least one more day, a 25-year-old. He's turning 26 tomorrow, I believe. That all 3-time All-Star to complement their other 3 under 26 All-Star caliber players. Though obviously Evan hasn't made the team just yet. So it is a wild, it's a monumental trade in the history of the franchise. It is a bold trade that is, I think, in a lot of ways going to define Kobe Altman's legacy as a front office executive for this team. And more than anything, this team should be pretty damn good this year, Bobby.
I think so. You think of the defensive core that they've already built here, and their biggest issue is scoring. So you bring a guy in that can just put points up, showing up like he can at his level. It's exactly what they needed here. And we'll get into some of the flaws of Mitchell, and there's many. I think there's a lot of ways you can nitpick this. But if you're just talking about putting the ball in the hoop, no one's done it quite like him the last however many years he's been in the league here. 24 points per game for his career, good efficiency, good shooter. He had this awesome catch and shoot year 2 years ago too. I believe he was close to 43%. So he's got some degree for doing that. I know Darius Garland had a great year in that department last year too. But that's where my mind goes first. Those 2 guards in the backcourt, the guys who are going to be making it happen here for Cleveland. On the upside, they can make it easier on each other now. You're not going to have Garland getting stuck late in games. You're not going to have Mitchell doing the same, which has kind of been his life in Utah. He's got some big men to dump it off to now. They'll probably feel a little bit more comfortable with. So I think everybody's job's made easier offensively by him being here. The downside is that both these guards are 6'1", and I know Garland probably is you'll probably defend Garland's defense more than some people will out there, but Mitchell, there he's coming off a disastrous season defensively, and we can go back and forth on why that was, but it was horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because he isn't like, he isn't even like Colin Sexton in terms of his defensive profile, Donovan Mitchell. Like I think you look at Darius. Darius, I thought worked pretty darn hard defensively, and he's just never going to be like a plus defender, right? He's 6'1". He has a small frame. He doesn't have exceptionally long arms. He did, pretty well with his body type and his experience level on the defensive end. He wasn't killing you out there. Donovan has the tools. That's, I think, why people are being so hard on him, because he's only 6'1". Dude has a 6'10" wingspan. He's a freaking pterodactyl.
And you got Rudy behind you.
Yeah, and he's also has a legitimate frame. He's built like a linebacker. He's strong. And I think that's why people are being hard on him. Obviously, there's like just a lot of negative conversation around the Jazz last couple of years, but I think this is a reasonable complaint to level at Donovan Mitchell, who was getting Dwayne Wade comps after his rookie year, where it was like, oh, this guy is going to be a legit two-way player. And then he kind of just stopped with the attention to detail and effort level on that end as his offensive role grew. I think if you're the Cavs, you're betting on a couple things. One, you have 2 7-foot defensive freaks on the front line to help insulate against a leaky backcourt. Whereas, we saw this year after year in the postseason with Utah, where Rudy got pulled out on a pick and roll or in some off-ball action when teams went 5 out, and then there was Bojan Bogdanovic, on the back line. Like, the Cavs have Evan Mobley there if Jarrett Allen gets pulled out, and the inverse holds up as well. So I think you're betting on that. You're betting on a happier workplace, frankly. Like, I don't think anyone thought that Utah locker room seemed super awesome.
No, going back
the last couple of years.
2 years now, Baco.
Yeah, so it didn't seem like a super happy place. You're betting on like a team defensive culture, like again, Darius Garland is by no means a lockdown defender. JB had that dude working hard on defense, and I think there's something to be said about if all your peers are being asked to work hard on defense, you're probably going to be asked. You might be a little bit more likely to do so yourself, as opposed to, I think Utah kind of just decided we're actually going to punt defense except Rudy. And that's like our actual identity. We're just going to be electric offensively, and Rudy's going to clean up all our messes. Whereas I don't think that's the Cavs' identity, even though they have that elite front court.
And it can't be. Yeah, and it can't be. Like, that would be the worst case scenario, I think, is, all right, these two guys are going to be a disaster. We're going to be overcompensating for them at all times. And I think that would probably bring the Cavs close to the middle of the league, maybe even the bottom half as a defense, if that's the way it goes. Because we saw the Jazz slip too last year, even though they had that great defensive center to help the back line there. And you highlight all the problems chemistry-wise. That group just felt like it was coming to an end. So I think effort, intensity, a good system, and like you said, 2 of those guys compared to one's going to give them a lot more versatility here. So that makes me like it. The playoff.
If I can say one last thing the Cavs are betting on is not going to be, having this insane,
that can take a hit.
I think that there is sometimes a little bit of naivete from basketball fans when high volume players go into more reasonable volume, because you do learn bad habits, and like Donovan's going to have to choose to break those habits. Even though Darius is going to be taking on, some extra on-ball responsibilities away that, Mike Conley, at that point in his career wasn't able to. Donovan has to make that choice still. But like, I think the logic of saying, hey, you're not going to have a 40 offensive, or you're not going to have a 40% usage rate for us to score the ball. Like, that sounds all well and good, but he still has to choose to reapportion that effort back on the defensive end. So I kind of hope that all the noise after that Dallas series, where, I mean, Donovan was kind of just getting laughed at around the league for his defensive effort in that series. I kind of hope that was a bit of I don't like this. And I think there's a good chance it will.
And if he just wanted to get out of there at that point, now he has his wish. And it's not New York. It's not his hometown. The bright lights aren't going to be on him. Evidently, I guess he was excited to hear that this was happening.
Which I think, and I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I think this really does speak to, like, if you're worried about like some diva vibes with Mitchell, like this is an interesting data point, right? Like if you had your heart set on going somewhere and it didn't happen, it's not even the worst. Like I kind of expected when the trade happened, like we're gonna get like a little initial bummed out, but then he'll come in and realize that they've got something cool. So the fact that he didn't get his wish, which by all reports was to go to New York, and was still like, hell yeah, I get to play with this team. I think that says something about his basketball priorities, I guess.
Well, you have to be excited, and I don't know how much this is going to shake out, and it's going to take time, right? And you guys talked about this in your reaction on the chase down, is that this might not happen year one, and it doesn't need to because of his contract, because of the long time span that they're going to have with these guys. They just need to take a step, and I wonder how much the role step is going to come into play here, because there's a team where Garland's got the ball in his hands all the time. Year one, divvying that out could help him to some degree, but does this become Mitchell's team? And is it a high volume right from the start? Does that work for everybody? You don't have a ton of guys here, fortunately, that need the ball in their hands to succeed. It's sort of just those two guards figuring it out right away. But I think that's always a question when a star comes to a new team, especially a team like this that already was starting to do a few things last year. I'm not saying that they were contending, but they figured it out as a group. Sexton wasn't there, so I guess he just steps into that role, and him and Garland figure out with the way Sexton and Garland were that year 2 years ago. But like you said, for a guy that had that high of a usage, who was so used to the world revolving around him in Utah, it's probably going to take some adjustment.
Yeah, you would think so. I don't think it's going to be much of an adjustment for Darius because Darius got a lot of off-ball reps this last year. He was playing basically the 2 on offense next to Ricky Rubio for the team's most successful stretch of the season. Darius is typically was among the top of the league and running on off-ball screens. He is an active off-ball player. I think he's already ready to play that role. Obviously we know what he can do with the ball in his hands. I do think Mitchell has the bigger adjustment because he's mostly played next to caretaker point guards. He's played, and that's probably underselling what Mike Conley's been able to do and what Ricky Rubio has been able to do next to him. They're both really great traditional point guards, but they weren't high volume, high control point guards. Like they were
Conley even kind of became like a catch and shoot guy for Utah.
Kind of, but by this last year, he certainly was. So I think there's an adjustment that has to happen there. It is so weird, to be honest, to be thinking about like whose team it is, but that stuff, like they're officially in the figure that stuff out zone, like
they sped up the process quite a bit here.
Yeah. It feels like, years. It felt like it was a years away kind of conversation.
Which I love, I was talking to Justin a couple weeks before this happened. We actually did a show about the Cavs. Forget why, but he's like, oh, we'll see what happens this year. The young guys will develop a little bit. They'll take another step. If you get a chance to speed up the process and get like 1-2 breaks away, like this team might possibly be at this point in the East. Like there's a case that they're better than Miami. You're probably not quite on that Boston, Philly, Milwaukee level yet, just because of experience.
Interesting that you have Philly above Miami.
We'll get to that. We'll get to the hierarchy at the end there. But the one thing this team, to me, is still lacking is the wing, and we'll get to that. But speeding up the process to me is a no-brainer. Like, I know you guys love Markkanen. I didn't love him as much, but that's a guy who, if you're going to use that salary in a good year to be a centerpiece of a deal, feel good about it. Maybe you'd rather send LeVert in there, but that's a good way to repackage a guy that you get essentially as a free agent a year ago. Agbaji could have fit great with this team. Who knows? Complete unknown. And then Sexton, who wasn't there at all last year, and you had this kind of free agent standoff going on with him anyway. And then picks. Like, all right, it looks like a lot on paper. It's deep into the future, which isn't great. But let's say that first one is mid-round, and then second swap doesn't even convey because Utah's still not there at that point. You start to rummage through those picks pretty quickly, especially if you're going to be a good team at a point where you don't even care that you're giving those up if things go right.
This was I was originally a little sticker shocked. I was a little worried about what was given up. Evan Mobley will turn 28 the year the last Cavaliers pick confers.
And Garland signed through 28. I was just looking at like, wow.
So like, unless things blow up in such a major way, this should not be, like things would have to go pretty, egregiously wrong. And
it'd have to be like a Brooklyn situation. And Brooklyn's still standing on their
feet. They traded for a bunch of 40-year-olds, like the Cavs have a core where Mitchell is the oldest guy of their core four. So I think it's pretty unlikely that they should get terribly burned. Like the Brooklyn situation where it's like cataclysmic. I think that even if it's not going awesome, it's not like you're not going to be able to flip Mitchell for at least a couple firsts.
That's the key, right? So like, you can recoup what you lose
can get out
if it's and that's why like people like start doing backflips and holding parades for the amount of picks some of these GMs get. When's it going to turn to winning? And I have more questions for Utah to this deal than I do for Cleveland. For Cleveland, I think it's a no-brainer, and they probably benefit from the fact that New York was in such a tense standoff with Utah that Ainge just kind of used Cleveland as sort of the mystery secondary team for whatever hold up was going on with the Knicks there. And I think the Cavs benefited price-wise coming out of this. I mean, you don't give up Mobley, don't give up Allen, don't give up Garland. Those are the centerpieces. And I think you were saying on the pod, those are the only guys you were looking at with this roster saying like they're here for the long haul. And
we're sure about that.
Yeah.
So and then the rest of them. Yeah. I think the more I've thought about it, the more I've warmed on it. The chance of you picking up another star level player within the window that you can really strike. Like the team they can generate like 20 million of cap room next summer. Mm-hmm. And so like this was kind of the right time. Is Mitchell the right player? I'm not sure we're gonna know. And he might not be. We've talked about some of his drawbacks. I think they're there, but like the reality of the situation is if you offered this exact same package to the Celtics for Jaylen Brown, they'd say no. That's not where we are as a franchise right now. If you were to offer the same set of package to New Orleans for Brandon Ingram, they'd probably say no because they're in a different place as a franchise. There aren't a lot of 26-year-old 3-time All-Stars that hit the market, and you don't always get to pick exactly the archetype that you want. So like,
especially if you're Cleveland.
Yeah, especially if you're Cleveland. So like, I think given the opportunity cost, which is really, you're swapping out Markkanen on court for Donovan Mitchell on court compared from last season to this season because Sexton, played so few and Ochai hadn't played at all yet.
It's down to think about.
Yeah, and you look at the outlay of picks, and it's like, yeah, it's about what it costs, and you're probably adding role players in hopes of conglomerating them for a Donovan Mitchell level player anyway. So like, is this team a title contender after the trade? No, but like, you're not going to be that unless Evan Mobley becomes a top 10 player anyway. So like, in a lot of ways, I think a trade like this is them saying, yeah, we think we at least have a couple all NBA guys among our existing core three, and we're just adding a 3-time All-Star that has scored 57 points in a playoff game to that core.
So that's where I'm going to go on a downside again, because what worries me about this group, and you're right, I don't think they're ready to win a title yet. I don't know how they'll get there. And one of my big problems here is, yes, they have cap space. They have a lot of trade flexibility when you think of that number that LeVert and Love can get you to. There's still a few picks you can play with there in the near term, though those won't be nearly as valuable now. How do you add that next piece, right? Because I think there's still one more here potentially. You're not going to draft it. Maybe you can buy like a late round pick, and if you nail it, there you go. But it's going to have to be some sort of crafty angling by Altman here to figure out that wing situation. Now, it could happen internally with Okoro. I think he's such an interesting guy here because he is that wing. It's not LeVert. He doesn't have the size to play that position, I don't think, and certainly not the shooting ability to do it. Okoro hasn't shown that yet either, but what's he, 22? And I just love him.
He's like He's like 5 months older than Evan Mobley.
And I loved him as a draft prospect. I felt like they got him in a great spot. As the Celtics, would have even tried to move up to get a guy like that, given his attributes and just how much upside and room he had to grow there. But last year wasn't great. The shooting numbers look better than they actually are, just based off like how open he is, it seems. And if he's going to be that guy who the ball gets funneled to again and again, or maybe other weaker defenders get stashed on here, Mobley's not a shooter. Allen's not a shooter. They don't have great wing depth behind these guys even. That's what worries me with this group, is that position on the wing where championships are built. LeBron, Tatum this last year, Wiggins stepping into that role for Golden State, Giannis. That's where it seems like championships are formed, around that wing player. And this team just doesn't have anything close to that level right now. And I don't see the path to get one.
Well, I think the idea of adding like a fifth all-star caliber player is not into any roster.
No, and they need a guy that can defend and hit threes.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple roads. I think you can probably get a really good low volume small forward for the cap space they're gonna have. I think that this next summer, Justin, for example, has his heart set on a guy like Harrison Barnes. Not a star by any means, but a guy who can defend, hit threes, and switch up and create that kind of versatility. I think there's also roads to take on. I just said this on another podcast I did, but I think there's also room with this cap flexibility with the players the Cavs have to maybe take a swing on someone who's a bit of a distressed asset. Someone like Gordon Hayward. Where do the Hornets really want to pay $60 million over the next 2 years to Gordon Hayward? Where they are,
if they
in the
start
East?
struggling. Yeah.
Maybe you can even get a pick for your trouble taking on someone at that price point. Like normally, if you want to salary dump someone for 30 million over 2 years, over 60 million over 2 years, you typically have to give up something. So like maybe they take a swing on a player like that that's like not perfect. Like a guy like 32-year-old, pretty beat up Gordon Hayward isn't exactly the belle of the ball, but for what the Cavs would need him to be, which is good
He'd
switch
be a
defender
dream for this roster.
Great, can run a pick and roll, can lead second units. Like that kind of guy, I think is available. And there are wings at the mid-level every year that can play good basketball. And that's really all the Cavs need, is someone who's smart and can play good basketball. So I think Okoro, there's a chance for him to get there. Again, he's improved. And I've said this on our pod quite a bit. Okoro gets a bad rap because the Cavs drafted this guy and told the whole world, this guy's 2-3 years before we even start thinking about him on offense. Like he's a project. And then all of a sudden the team got good and they said, Isaac, we're going to need you to be a playoff player right now. like this was not the development curve that shut up, Justin. Justin's in the chat making fun of me for the Hayward comments.
He can't stay away.
I think that Okoro, was kind of a victim of circumstance with the team getting as good as they did fast. But he's on the right curve. He got better shooting as a corner 3-point shooter this last year. The volume is not there. The gravity is not there. But if he can even get decent and at a decent volume, then all of a sudden he fits perfectly. Fits like a glove. So, I think that there's roads to them getting the three they need. Could it hold them back from title contention? Sure, but I don't think they're ready to do that anyway this year.
No, you probably don't need to. But again, it's you speed up that process a little bit. You start to see some wins coming in. You're in a competitive race, and all of a sudden,
there's going to be pressure on them.
Yeah, you're thinking, what's going to be that move that gets you a little bit closer? Plus, you have that money to play with this year, and I wonder what this means for Kevin Love, because what's it, $28 million this year? That's a huge, huge, huge matching piece. Teams will love that kind of expiring money coming back. If the Cavs are ready to pay some tax here, they can certainly take back some money long term, like Hayward. I love that idea. But what is his role in all this now? Because he was kind of an important veteran piece last year. He's been with this team for a minute. Maybe his time's coming up here, but he had a good season last year. Floor spacing is a need here, so he's going to have a ultra important role, at least as this team's constituted right now. But at some point, you're going to look and say, all right, what can we get out of that $28 million? And this is the time to do it, unless you're doing a sign and trade or something, which isn't going to happen this summer. So it's now or never.
I think his on-court role actually got a lot clearer this season. Because they were in this weird spot with Lowry because they kind of signed Lowry to be the backup 4 of the future. And play with Mobley, play with Jarrett. And then Kevin was good all year. And they're like, oh, we didn't expect you to be good. So it was this weird spot where if they were going to keep Lowry and eventually upgrade on Lowry in the starting lineup at 3, someone was going to be the odd man out. Now Kevin's role is very simple. I'm going to be a microwave backup 4 for this team and be a veteran leader that everyone likes. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. This team was young. When they went to play Brooklyn in their play-in game, everyone kind of crapped their pants for the entire first quarter, and everyone clearly collectively turned to Kevin and was like, "Hey, can you help calm us down?" And he did, and he helped get them back into that game. So like he adds a lot of intangible value and tangible value. By the way, second place in 6th Man of the Year voting last year. It's not like he was just like a pleasant surprise. He was actively
That's
very
the tricky
helpful and
thing,
very
though,
good.
right? Because he can be really helpful right now, but he's on the older side. That contract's coming up. Maybe it's like a Horford situation that I've been thinking about with Boston, where that comes up. All of a sudden, this $30 million guy who was really helpful for you is back at a minimum or mid-level kind of contract. And then you're like, wow, this is all just became this much more valuable to you. But that cap slot's important when you're a team that's over the cap. And sliding in another guy, Hayward's tricky, right? Because I love his game and I love what he brought to Boston. But the last couple of years you saw with him, if you're relying on him at all and his health, and then you get hit late in the year with an injury to him, your chances are taking a serious hit. And, the Hornets rely on him more than the Cavaliers would be. But that's the tricky thing of going for a guy like that, an unknown commodity. There's probably some other names we could kick around too in terms of the trade market here. But to me, it almost feels like Love, given this team's needs along the wing there, would be an inevitable guy to look at. And, LeVert could be too, right? But how much value does he really have at this point?
Yeah, I hear that, and people are going to throw out the Love number. You still have to find someone who like what is the right partner? Who's looking to add Kevin Love at 30
Whatever
million?
team's not going to get off money. Could even be Utah. Do you go back to Utah and be like, all right, let's talk about some of these other guys?
Yeah, I think there's something there for any team that is, that has, found themselves overspending. But also, you have to have a player you really want to get back to make up for it. So I think the Love thing, I'm going to assume he's going to be on the team for the short term. I think LeVert is actually a more likely trade target because he's also expiring, as is Jetty Osman. Well, Jetty Osman has a partially guaranteed the season after that, is it would be easily waivable, and that gets you pretty close to Kevin's number. And I think of a team that might, I mentioned the Hornets, like they probably need some wing scoring and maybe a flyer on a guy like Jetty, and I think it's the same value with none of the intrinsic kind of ties the Cavs have to a guy like Kevin Love. So and Caris is a guy that Cavs have to decide on whether they want to pay long term as well, because he's on an expiring himself. So I think Caris is just as likely to be moved as Kevin, and I think their value is probably closer than you think.
Yeah, probably because of the age difference. And now LeVert isn't exactly young, and he hasn't developed
Not
much
old.
of what. Yeah, no, they're certainly not comparable to Love, but he hasn't developed so much of these things you thought he would. Those best runs with the Nets there, and he was just such a great pick for Brooklyn. Cavs, ultimately, I think you look back on that move and you say, all right, it was a worthy flyer. Rubio's already back. Would end up becoming like a second rounder with Cleveland sneaking in there.
It'll be a first next year after this season. It'll become 2 seconds if they don't convey this year. And buddy, if they don't make the playoffs this year, things have gone terribly wrong.
Kick back a couple of years then, yeah. So not a great move. Doesn't seem like he's a fit here. So
we'll see, man. I think he got a raw deal. He got traded to the Cavs. Helped him win a game like immediately after getting traded there, and then got hurt, and then came back, and he is a player who's super dependent on pick and roll play. And the Cavs had exactly one guy who was a decent screener last year in
And he
Jarrett
was
Allen,
gone. Yep.
and then he was gone. So like it's kind of I think Caris got a raw deal. I think this is the year where we learn, hey, is Caris a guy that championship teams should care about, or like contending teams should care about, or is he gonna spend the rest of his career playing on fringe lotto teams?
Putting up
Because
numbers.
this
He
is
might
a
just be one of those guys.
yeah, but this is a good situation for him. He's got pick and roll threats. He's got good shooters in Darius and Donovan to be pairing with the backcourt. He'll get to play exclusively against second units. He should still have a high usage just because as a six man. Like we're gonna learn if he is the player that he probably thinks he is this year. And I think the NBA intelligentsia is too quick to decide what a player is like, but this is the year. This is the year for him to prove that he is a truly a winning player and not just someone who gets stats.
Yeah, and that volume will have to go down a little bit, which is scary for me because you got the two guards there who need the ball a ton. And this isn't a catch and shoot guy. He isn't really that solution on the wing. So I don't see a great path. Maybe unit stuff, like you said, pick and roll. There's potential for that there, but he's at such a key position with so much uncertainty on this team, and he doesn't have a lot of attributes to solve some of those issues there. So I'm not high on it, but I'll give him every chance since he played 10 starts after coming over 19 games period. So it wasn't a lot that we got to see him there, and certainly he's only a year or two off that scare. Going Indiana there with whatever that ended up being, some sort of tumor or something. So he's had a lot of
crazy.
Yeah, he had a lot of bumps along the way, injuries coming into the league, that setback as well, he mentioned. So we'll see what happens there. I love this team, though. Great defensive floor, a lot of good young players, multiple all-stars, and that doesn't even account Mobley's growth here, which, like, at this point, after this great rookie year, I thought he should have been Rookie of the Year. He just got off to too hard of a start, and then Barnes came around late, and it seemed like a little bit of recency bias there.
And the Cavs started losing.
So
it's hard when you start losing. I wasn't worked up about it.
Yeah, and if your thing's defense, you're not going to have great numbers. But what's the next step for Mobley? Because I think everybody's already thrilled about it, but he's going to become a top 10 player or something like you talked about. There's still a lot of steps for him to go.
Yeah, it's funny. It's normally the Mobley thing is really interesting because normally, at least in my experience, when a player comes out in their rookie year and is so good, the fans of that team go nuts, and then the rest of the NBA like commentary, it needs to calm them down. Like I feel like that was the case with Kyrie. That has been the case all over the place. Like it's typically like the wider NBA is the one that tends to be more sober about a player. Sometimes I feel like I have to explain to the wider NBA like the places where I still see Evans' game needing to develop, because like I think that he's such a flashy player that has such a high ceiling on a game to game basis that you go, oh man, this guy's already Tim Duncan, and he's not yet. Yeah, I think he can. I think he can be a Duncan-esque player in the league. I think he can be a top 3, top 5 player in the NBA. But he has a lot of room to grow, both from a skill perspective. Like Jackson Frank wrote up a really good piece about the way that his handle, which it looks really nice when he gets moving in the open court, but when he gets pressed, he picks it up right away. His handle is not as good as it's purported to be. I think he can work on that part of his skill game. The jumper looked really good at certain points. He also shot 25% for the season from 3. He's clearly been working on that a ton in the offseason. And then there is a lot of just strength stuff. He still has a kid's body. I don't expect him to ever like bulk up. And they don't do that anymore.
He's so fortunate he has Allen next to him. Well, what a blessing to end up next to a guy like that.
Yeah, but he doesn't have like that functional man strength yet. You know what I mean? And everyone thought that was going to limit him on the defensive end of the ball. I don't think it did, except in very rare circumstances. I think it was on offense where his lack of heft really hurt him. He got pushed off his spots a lot. When he didn't get there first, he couldn't get there a lot of the time. and it forced him to kind of use his arms and his length to try to generate some weird angles that affected his ability to score at a high level and create offense at a high level. And it's not for lack of trying. This is not an Anthony Davis thing where you're watching him going, can you please put your shoulder into someone? No, like Mobley wants to play physically. And when he does have the strength advantage or a size advantage, he has a bit of nastiness to him. He just doesn't have the tools yet to move those guys out of the way and generate those clean, easy looks where he can use his elite level touch as a big man. So I think once he gets stronger, once the jumper gets a little bit more consistent, and then the handle gets cleaner, and I think that'll come. I think the handle gets easier once guys respect other parts of your game a little bit more on the offensive end. But like, it's a weird one where so much with young players in this league, you see the skill so far in front of their feel. Like you have guys that come into the league that can shoot the hell out of the ball. They can dribble the hell out of the ball. They might even be able to pass, but like all the little idiosyncrasies of the game, they're not there yet. Evan is the complete inverse to me, where his feel is elite, elite, elite. His positioning is elite. His understanding of the game, the way he attacks 4-on-3s when he slips a screen, and can read the floor in front of him. That's all there already. It's the skill stuff. It's the body stuff that needs to get there. And that's why I'm so confident in him as a eventual top 5 player, because like all the stuff that he needs to work on just takes time, practice, and growing into his body. But I think he is already a basketball savant. And I, as a consumer of basketball, I very much am biased towards basketball geniuses, and I think he's one of them.
Yeah, and I like that you threw Davis out there, because the little steps Davis took early on to adapt, I think he could probably do similarly. Like Davis that first year with New Orleans, it was a bit of a defensively, and he had that great defensive acumen coming in, and he certainly showed it as a rookie. But he had to step out and hit those mid-rangers, and then he got rid of that really, really fast. Eventually had the three-pointer, and then he just had this great array of attributes on the offensive end that made him one of the better players in the league. You could definitely see Mobley taking that same trajectory.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is I don't know if Mobley is going to be a high-volume scorer the way Anthony Davis became that. I think Davis has such a scoring mentality.
And he became a great shooter at his prime.
For big stretches, Davis became a great shooter. A guy who really looked an elite foul drawer. That's another great skill of Anthony Davis. I just don't know if that's Mobley's demeanor. Mobley is such a connector. I think of him. I watch him the way, like right now, the way I watch like late stage Tim Duncan, stretches of Kevin Garnett, where they could be the best player on the floor and score 22 points. And I think that's often good. That's the way I see Mobley's career going, especially now that he's
that could be his role on this team. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially on a team with Darius and Donovan, who are going to score a lot of points. I just think he will always make the right play. And, and like, I remember early Garnett, that was kind of a dig on him sometimes, is like, he was such a basketball genius offensively that he, sometimes wasn't the high volume scorer that Minnesota needed him to be. I think I see some very similar future in Evan, or I see a similar future for Evan, because I think he thrives as that connector. And how many players can be a top 5 player averaging 23 points a game in the modern NBA? Not many.
No, I'm glad we're being Mobley, Duncan, Garnett, Davis.
And again, I led this talking about the stuff that he's not that good at yet. Like, and that's how much I believe in him as a guy. Because and the other thing with him that's interesting is he is very soft spoken, but and kind of a gentle dude. He went on the Road Trippin' podcast after he was first drafted with Richard Jefferson, Channing Frye, and I'm like, this poor kid has never been more uncomfortable in his life. Like, these guys are such big personalities. He's clearly such a wallflower, but that does not extend to his basketball demeanor at all. And that's really exciting. Like, this guy clearly loves basketball. He loves playing with physicality. He's just, I mean, just a super exciting time to root for the Cavs, because this kid is so nuts.
I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors here before we stack up the rest of the East. I want to get into that quick with Kari here before we get him out of here. Of course, athleticgreens.com/Garden. We've told you about them a million times. 75 vitamins, minerals, antigens, different things to make you feel good, digestive help, immune defense, and they're going to give you some immune boosting vitamin D, 5 free travel packs with your first purchase for helping out us at the Garden Report. CLNS Media as a whole, so go check them out. They got a lot of great products to contain them in, drink them in. It's just one scoop, great flavor, and we've been using 2 months and feeling great. So athleticgreens.com/Garden. Go see if it's for you. The reviews are amazing. And if you send your receipt, tag John and get a phenomenal t-shirt from the Garden Report. And of course, Calm, they're back, calm.com/garden. 40% off a Calm prescription. Sleep sounds. I use it pretty much every night with the rain to go to sleep. And pretty much some everybody in there. Bedtime stories, all that different kind of stuff. The premium version's great. Give it a try. Again, you'll be helping us out here at CLNS Media, calm.com/Garden. That's 40% off prescription. So, Kari, if we're going to stack up the East now, after this trade, after pretty much everything's done now this offseason, I like the Bucks at the top. I'll probably go with them. Kind of a little revenge season. They'll get Joe Ingles back at some point, which I think is a really underrated ad. Chris Middleton. See, they find a way to use Serge Ibaka this season as well, which I find interesting. And then, of course, you just get Giannis, who's over in Europe already scoring like 42, 15, whatever game. So I think they'll kind of be back with a vengeance this year at the top of the East. I'm not super high on Philly. Postseason wise, a little bit of a more in shape Harden, some of those monster pick and roll numbers with Embiid, and a few good additions along the periphery of the team, whether it's House as a shooter, as a secondary ball handling, scoring guard, and then Embiid just being Embiid. Again, another guy who's just at his peak right now, dominance on both ends. Tucker can help too, probably, at least alleviating some of the defensive load along the perimeter for them, even if I don't love that deal long term. So I'd be fine stacking them up at 2, 3. This Gallinari injury, it's not a huge hit to them, but I think that might hurt some of their inning-eating abilities. One injury now can kind of throw with some of the depth that they have along the perimeter there, along with inside. Like, they're going to have to figure out some interior depth too. Even though I love their ability to go out and win on any given night, I don't think 3 is underselling them too much. Then I could see Cleveland.
I think you're underselling them. I think some Celtics should be top 2. But anyway, I'll let you go off, Kang.
Well, I think it's close. I think this whole East is going to be super close, like spot to spot to spot, even from like 3 to 4, which is where I think the real drop off will probably be. But how do you kind of picture that top 4 looking?
I think I tend to go by tiers just because I think it is so tight.
Yeah.
Right now, I think tier 1. I have Milwaukee, I have Boston, I have Miami. Still, even though I, like you, am a little worried about I think they're probably the biggest swing potential in this group. And I have Brooklyn. I until I see them stink with that team healthy, I'm gonna assume they're good. Everyone talks about them being such a low floor team. Their low floor this year was 44 wins. Like, their nightmare year, their disaster season, 44 wins. So they won like 2 more games. They would have been like a 4 seed. So, like, I think people are underrating their ceiling, even though I think that, it could go really wrong. But I don't think Kyrie and KD are going to dog it. I don't think that they're at that point in their career where they're going to dog it.
That's the thing. They're either going to be up there, those teams, or they're going to be gone. I don't think there's any in between where they're just kind of listless and mediocre.
Yeah, they could like if they come out and dog it, I think they could, certainly accelerate any moves. I kind of don't think I'm just gonna assume they're gonna be good till they're not. So I think, and I just think that talent level and the rest of that roster, which is pretty freaking good, by the way, it's not like it's just them and a bunch of schlubs. So I think that they deserve to be up there. I think it's a 4-team tier 1 for me, where it's very interchangeable. And then I actually have Philly down in tier 2 with uh Philly, Toronto, and Cleveland.
Because of Harden's
And I
continued
think,
deterioration.
yeah, and just I think Embiid is just as risky as, betting on Harden and Embiid feels not much less risky than betting on Durant and Kyrie. Like, I feel like those guys are, they're one injury away. I did like that Montrezl Harrell pickup for them. But, I think that, I think any of those tier 2 teams, though, can slot into tier 1 if things break right. Uh, if they break perfectly for those teams. And I think just about any of those tier 1 teams, with the exception of, in my opinion, Milwaukee and Boston, who I think are like tier 1 unless like nuclear cataclysmic terrible things happen to their seasons. But I think these tiers are very flexible.
Yeah, if they're
So
healthy, they're 1 and 2, I think. And the Celtics, I think their advantage against all those teams at the top, particularly there, is that their guys are out there every night. I mean, Tatum's going
yeah,
to play every
they're
game.
young.
Brown, barring some more hamstring issues, is probably at least 60 plus, 70 pop up. And then those guys drive a ton of winning. And that starting lineup, too. I can't get over what they did there, winning 22 or 25. I don't want to like go to the moon on them yet, because I still think there's a few issues here to sort out. We saw the old Celtics pop back up during the playoff run that they
Yeah, just
avoided.
during their finals run.
So that could pop up again to start the regular season. Again, a slow start could really have you questioning the edges of this roster again, like Grant Williams or Derek White or any of those guys that really struggled deep during that run and hurt their
I
spacing, hurt their offensive
I just think
ability.
that's rich people problems, Bobby. Like, I think
Could
that's
be.
rich people when, like,
But
a
I'm not
lot
here to
of
wave the flag. I
yeah,
gotta, nitpick a
yeah,
little bit here.
I hear you, but I'm gonna wave it for you as a very well established Celtic hater. I think,
You love
like,
this roster, then.
yeah, a lot of 7th and 8th men start to look bad in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
There's no greater magnifying glass, especially when you're playing a defensively genius team like that Golden State team.
Team that's won 3 championships. Yeah.
Yes, and then also, like, I actually have been meaning to ask a Boston fan about this, because this jumped out to me, and this is the reason I picked the Warriors in the finals. Is during the year, Grant Williams said that Darius Garland was one of the hardest covers in the league for the Celtics, and that made me wonder: did this team, like, they're kind of built to guard the Durants and Giannis's of the world. They're not as
Right.
built to guard these water bug point guards that are just constantly moving. Like, they kind of have these guys that are great for hefty, slower superstar wings. So part of me wonders, like, if they also just hit a really bad matchup in Golden State.
Could have been, especially after that run where it's Durant, Giannis, and then Bam. So much of it was front court oriented defensively, and going double big is certainly part of that as well. But even their guards are big. I mean, Brown's a wing effectively, and Smart. I think that's always kind of been his MO. Is you almost feel better about him switching inside on 4s and 5s as you do guarding Steph Curry or someone like that, De'Aaron Fox. Those are kind of the guys that have given him trouble in particular over the years. And we've been talking about that for years on the Garden Report. In fact, he actually told us to shut the fuck up after we started. But that was, me. I interviewed him the other day. We're back on good terms. That actually wasn't even me who said that. That was our co-host John on the show. But that was some of the things we were asking with Smart, during 2021. And then he comes out and wins Defensive Player of the Year. So he had the last laugh there. This defense, though, they're versatile. And you go against one of those quicker guys. You got Brogdon to guard guys off ball now. And White, I thought, was, for all his offensive issues, exceptional defensively on Curry early in that series. And then Curry figured some stuff out later. So they just have so many options now. Losing Gallinari hurts.
They're
but
awesome.
yeah,
And
that's
I don't
probably
think the
the guy.
Gallo thing
Yeah.
matters at all. I really
No.
don't. I think that, like, I don't think he really fits their overall. I didn't like that fit for them anyway, just because their identity is not having weak links out there. And yeah, I guess TLDR, man, I think that those two teams are just so freaking good. And like that's why, like, if there are any Cavs fans who think that this makes the Cavs an instant contender, like, do I think the Cavs can beat just about any team in the East in a 7-game series? Like if things break just right, probably, but like, dude, some really good teams are gonna go home in the first round of this playoff. So if you think
Could be the
that
Cavs.
yeah,
Yeah.
if anyone other than Boston and Milwaukee expect, and I think that's an important word, expect to win a first round series as a bare minimum for their season, like I would caution against it because it's going to be like you can have an awesome year and go home.
Well, yeah. So who would be kind of those 4 teams to round it out at the bottom there? And someone as low as 8 could still be challenging there. I think of the Bulls, the Hawks probably. I'm not like doing backflips on them either, even with the Murray addition there. I actually want to see what Murray looks like outside of San Antonio, but they're probably in that mix now. I think Cavs are
I think
probably
there's 8
firmly above the
teams.
playing line.
I think there's 8 teams right now in the East, and I think that I had to just power rank it, I would go Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, Cleveland. I'm putting Cleveland above Philly and Toronto. Then I'll go Brooklyn.
I
Then I'll go
forget
Philly,
Toronto a lot.
Toronto at 5 and 6. And then I think the Bulls and Hawks are hanging out in 7 and 8 in some order. So
That
like
sounds right.
I think everyone else, I'm just frankly like I'm not that inspired, and I think I must have left someone off because there's 9 teams. I think the top 9 teams in the league in the East last year are still the top 9 teams, and Charlotte, New York, Washington, Indy, Detroit, Orlando, like they're just not in the same league. So someone is gonna, not even make it into the top 8. If you had to make me pick right now, I would pick Chicago to fall out.
Could be Chicago. That's probably the safest one just because of the ball stuff, but
But dude,
I wouldn't rule out the Nets.
the play-in is so high variance that like I'd almost like struggle to care. Like
Yeah.
it like losing one or 2 games, like that's that's an NCAA tournament level sample size we're dealing with. So like
That's essentially what got the Hawks in last year. Just some
that's it's
wackiness
just
at the bottom.
chaos. That's just
Yeah.
chaos at that point. So like I think like it's most important in this modern NBA to be a top 6 team. I think the Cavs are firmly in that top 6, and like we talked about our expectations on the latest pod, and I said like their new expectation, the season was not successful if their season was not successful if they are not a top 6 team in the East, because avoiding the play-in should be everyone in the East's goal, because that thing is going to be a bloodbath.
Mm-hmm. Hey, and listen, I think Chicago's the safe pick from possibly being out of that mix. I'm throwing Brooklyn in there. I mean, we just saw Durant demand to fire the coach, the GM. Who knows what the next Kyrie
And
thing
they were
is
just
going to
there.
be? And then everyone still talks about Simmons. Like, where's he rank in the league? What's he going to do for this team? Can we just see him show up first? I just want to see it. I want to see him on the floor and see what he looks like as a basketball player in 2022 before I give that any credence. And honestly, the moves around the edges outside of Royce O'Neal, I didn't even really like. So they still have coaching worries. They still have defensive
Losing
worries.
Bruce Brown hurts.
Yes. And honestly, like, are these stars so fleeting that at the slightest little stretch of bad play here, this whole thing's going to crumble? That's still my question for them. But we'll see.
I'm not going to push back on any Nets outcome. I think if you feel strongly about how the Nets are going to do, you're probably a little high on your own supply.
He is. Carter Rodriguez, Chase Down Pod. Their reaction to Donovan Mitchell is out there as well, so go check that out, as well as new episodes coming to preview the season. It's September, so we're going to have games before we know it here, under a month until preseason, just over a month until the regular season gets rolling. I believe that's on the 18th. So we didn't really have an off season here. It was just action right through the summer. These teams are already pretty much back. I can't wait to see the Cavs Celtics games. In fact, Justin reminds me all the time, these two teams really didn't play each other healthy once last year. I think there were 2 games during that COVID stretch in December, and then another wacky one where everyone was out. And I think one of the battles between these teams was like a Dennis Schroeder game. So seeing these two teams a little more fully firm going head to head is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. You don't have Enos Cantor to hurt one of our players again this year, so
Who's
you
that?
know, I think he hurt Mobley, or maybe it was Horford that hurt Mobley.
Oh, that's right.
I'm
It
being
was
a lazy
Horford.
take. I'm being a lazy take, Smith, right now. Justin, of course, would have all the receipts because he is the petty king in chief of the Chase
There was
Down
a little
podcast.
Horford, yeah, Mobley dust up there that yeah left Mobley out of that game. So those two teams, and that's like the kind of argument against the mini series, which I love, is that like if there's a little injury there, your whole season against playing one team's just out the window off 2
Yep.
games there. So I get it, but I still love the idea that there's a little bit of that in the schedule this year too. Again, Carter Rodriguez, he's on Twitter at Carter Shade. Great to have you here on Dome Theory, Carter.
Awesome, man. It was great to finally be on, and I hope that I'm the first call from now on, not that fraud